we don't learn anything from winning. We learn a whole lot more from failure. There's so much information in pain if we're willing to learn from it. So if I could learn from going blind suddenly and figuring out how to cope and deal and prosper, then maybe I could share that with others.
Aaron, I want to start with this. One, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so excited to talk today. You and I connected not too long ago, and I shared with you that just several weeks back, I was suspended on like a rope bridge at this exercise, and I did it blindfolded. And that experience still sits with me as a major moment of having to go through change. I lost my vision for a little bit. You lost your vision in a more permanent way. And I want to hear a little bit about the story, but I also want to spend most of our time today talking about the change that you've had to make in seeing the world differently. Can you give me a little background as to how your change happened? And then I got some deeper questions that we can dig into.
Of course. Yeah. And I love that episode, by the way. I was imagining how it would have been kind of like cheating if, I'd be the one in your position and said, okay, I'll volunteer to put the blindfold on. It's kind of my daily thing.
Yeah.
I once attended an event. I spoke at an event called Dining in the Dark, where everybody eats in total pitch darkness.
Oh, wow.
And I just call that dining. But yeah, I'm totally blind and completely deaf as well. Without this one cochlear implant, I'd be pulling the full Helen Keller. And it happened separately as well. They're related, but happened about almost 4 years apart. I used to be an Army EOD technician, explosive ordnance disposal. It's the military's bomb squad, and an IED, a roadside bomb detonated, took my eyesight, cracked my skull, and they patched me up, but I couldn't see. Never, I'd be blind for the rest of my life. And then 4 years later, through the, what we thought were the patched cracks in my skull, I contracted bacterial meningitis. And that is what caused me to lose my hearing. And thankfully, because of the cochlear implant, the technologies, medical science, all of that today, I'm able to hear you. It is kind of like, described, it's kind of like trying to figure out what's going on in the kitchen through the drive-through speaker, but it's way better than the alternative. So
Sure.
There we are.
So that story summation is fast, but I'm sure that process was long. I mean, 4 years is a long time, but also I'm sure healing took time. I'm sure that fear crept in. What happened initially internally with you with fear or worry when you discovered you could no longer see and might not anymore?
It's an interesting concept because it almost surprises you what you're actually afraid of. As men, we conquer our fear in a more of a physical way, more visceral way. I thought I was pretty much dominated the whole fear category by being an Army soldier and an explosives guy, making that long walk towards something everybody else is trying to get the heck away from. But what I found, my injuries showed me, was that my deepest fears were quite a bit more ethereal. My usefulness, my utility in this world. I was afraid of being a burden. I was afraid of not being the kind of man was supposed to be. The picture of a strong man, not being able to be the husband and father, and not filling the shoes of the man I was supposed to be. And and of course, this was after having gone through that transition from immature teenager and young adult man into uh, a productive, active, adult human, and making all of those early mistakes and feeling like I was starting to finally hit my stride, only to get knocked down and have my entire world turned upside down.
What I can interpret through all of this too is that you were at a junction of identity, that when this happened, the person that you believed yourself to be had to radically change, to go from military, where I'm making a couple assumptions here, but I have to bet that you were in decent shape, that you were pretty coordinated, that your mobility was high, that you were like really aware to be able to go into something like EOD. And then it had to change. It had to dramatically change, knowing that eyesight and hearing were no longer senses you could rely on the same. Did you grapple with that for a while, or was there a piece in your transition?
It seems that every time I start feeling a little bit bigger than my britches, so to speak, is when I get knocked back to, get my head resized. I get my ego checked. Because, being in the service, being an EOD technician, it requires a certain level of confidence and ability. And I would call these guys the alpha nerds. Yeah, they're physically and technically very proficient people. They've got to be able to function in the non-permissive environments and be able to use critical thinking skills to diffuse munitions and roadside bombs and improvised explosive devices and all that. And to be among these elite was definitely a source of pride. And then to have that stripped away from me, because of course they don't even like having, they don't even allow colorblind folks in the job. So being completely blind kind of precludes me from continuing on. And they said, they asked me at the hospital where I wanted to retire, and I said I didn't, and I didn't want to accept it. I'd heard about, some service members that were staying on active duty. I said, I just don't want to retire. I could stay on, maybe not do the job, but I could teach it. So, I got sent down to the schoolhouse, but it took me almost a year and a half of instructing to finally come to grips with the situation that I would never be able to do the job. I didn't have anything, I had to prove to myself that I didn't have anything left to prove. And I kind of transitioned into a whole new life.
I'm fascinated by this for a variety of reasons. One, the year and a half long process to come to, your terms. Certainly I get it in the only sense that I can, right? Having gone through life transitions, not nearly as dramatic or as staggeringly difficult. And a lot of our work and our programs are about leaders and business owners that are, maybe they're not satisfied with their current life, their business, their health, their fitness, their relationships. And in building a new vision for themselves, it feels like starting over. And that process, in your case, was not an option. For many that we work with, it's an option, right? For successful CEOs, it is totally based on their choice to whether or not they've experienced enough difficulty or pain or stuckness to say, I'm ready to rebuild and redesign my life. But you didn't have that option. It just had to be done. So how did you go about, like, where did you start when you finally got to a place of like, okay, I need to completely rethink what my life is, what my mission is, where I'm going? Where did you begin?
It was more of a tactical thing first, because there's the military, the Army in particular, because they'd racked up the most casualties, the most injuries. Uh, they just had the process. Here, you got injured, so you get it put into this funnel, this timeline. So patch up the physical stuff, and then I got sent from Walter Reed in Maryland to uh, another hospital in between, but then it was to blind rehabilitation. So I got taught by one of I think they got 14 blind rehabilitation units around the country, and they're run by the VA hospital. So I went to Augusta, Georgia to learn how to be blind. And it was part of that process. And um, while, yes, I mean, I had plenty of time to consider my situation, but it wasn't as though I just went blind and then they cut me loose. And then okay, now what do I do? I had months and months, almost a year of total, active duty, medical and, actual treatments, and then rehabilitation. And during that time, I had to learn how to be blind. So the basic living skills, using that long white cane, uh, and learning how to use adaptive technology like my talking phone and computer and all that, do the text to speech. So the process was more, technical and tactical rather than a, a mind shift that came, I guess, along with the process, but it was more of a secondary effect. I had to learn how to do it, and then I could learn how to be it, so to
Yeah,
speak.
how to apply it. In learning how to navigate being blind, what can you see differently now that you may not have had the sense to pay attention to, or to feel, or to hear or experience differently? What's different? What can you see that we can't see?
Well, literally, I can't say anything. These are prosthetic eyes. So I see, so to speak, everything through the cane, my sense of touch, what I can still hear through the cochlear implant, which is artificial, and just uh, literally through vibrations and, like I said, my sense of touch. So I don't see anything.
When, socially, and you probably know this from time in the military, when you're connecting, there's a degree of like eyesight. I'll use that word, eyesight, that creates the ability to understand the world around you. And when that transition into vibration and touch and other senses happened, did it feel like you were disconnected from everything? Did it feel like you had to come unglued?
You know, it's definitely, it was, for me, it wasn't a gradual blindness. Like some people, their vision, their eyesight is stolen from them gradually over time. And I think that's like tearing off Band-Aids slowly. But then there are pros and cons to all of it. Like you have time to prepare. Whereas for me, it was, I didn't have time to lament or, to worry about it going. It was just happened, and now I got to deal with it. So for me, it was just a sudden transition, and then it was like, okay, now I got to figure out how to live my life. I had to figure out how to be a father and a husband, and I had to figure out what to do. And now that was the thing. It was, now that I'm not no longer putting the uniform on, what will I do? What will keep me busy? What will keep me engaged? And of course, most importantly, is how do I become a service to society? How do I play a part where I'm not just a taker, but I can still be of service?
Dude, that's a great postulation of where you are today. How do I lend service out? Uh, as someone that no doubt relied on vision heavily, and I'm sure because of military, there's also a degree of mobility that's enabled by vision, right? Like I, being suspended up on that bridge is the closest thing that I have, but I can imagine even walking around my house. If you blindfolded me, I'd be bumping into everything. It would take me a while to relearn, of course, and hopefully I never have to, but even the sense of like mobility and freedom and sports and athleticism and gym, like some of those small things that I may take for granted all have to change. How did you go about deciding what service would look like? How did you go about determining what activities you would put your heart and soul into?
That was also a gradual change. I mean, even though the physical transition for me was immediate, deciding and figuring out what, but my, I guess, life's purpose again was, at first, it's like the oxygen mask. Put yours on first, and then you can figure out, and then you can put on, your neighbors, your kids, whatever. For me, it was figuring out how to live, and then figuring out how to use the new skills with the old skills. So I was figuring out not just how to live, but this was also a great revelation for me. It was that whole thing about doing hard stuff. Right? We don't um, we don't learn anything from winning. We learn a whole lot more from failure. There's so much information in pain, if we're willing to learn from it. So if I could learn from going blind suddenly and figuring out how to cope and deal and prosper, then maybe I could share that with others. So my purpose became my own success, and then sharing it with others and teaching. So if I could be a point of, inspiration, motivation, perhaps I could tell the story. And one of my favorite quotes, and I swear I have no idea where it came from, probably a meme on Facebook, but somebody, somebody said it and it locked in my head, and it was, perhaps, someday the story of your struggle could be the blueprint for somebody else's survival. So if I can tell my story and I can make that kind of impact, then that's a wonderful purpose for me. And it gave each day meaning, and I began greeting my own situation with gratitude for the opportunity it had for me.
So let's unpack that blueprint a little bit. It's easy as a guy to allow pain only up to a threshold, or to just completely dismiss it, right? So pain will bubble up, and then we'll navigate it, and then we'll deal with it. But if it's less than our threshold, we just ignore it, and we just compartmentalize it. And if pain is such a good teacher, how do we help individuals navigate and learn from pain? How has your experience taught you to navigate pain, small and large, so that you can learn the lesson without having to get to the threshold where there need to be like dire changes?
Imagine just sticking your hand on a hot burner on the stove.
That sounds awful.
Yeah, but the pain is the alarm, like the fire alarm. The pain isn't the actual root of what's happening. It's just something going off in your head telling you something's wrong. So if you just ignored it, you're just going to continue to leave your hand there and let it keep burning. So what if you're compartmentalizing and you're ignoring the alarm going off? Instead, I've learned that there's the other thing is like not focused, not to dwell on the alarm. Like, oh my God, the smoke detector is going off and it's really loud and I hate it. Okay. But what's it trying to tell you? There's fire somewhere. So there's the two sides of that coin. You got to find a way to hear it, not be overwhelmed by it, and also not ignore it, but to recognize it for what it is. And it's telling you something. And if you're able to hear it the right way, you process what the pain is telling you, then it's not a matter of being able to ignore it or overcome or compartmentalize. It's just a matter of listening and learning.
Yeah, I love the idea of listening. Man, I can think back to even as young as like my teens, where I understood physical pain from workouts and training. I was all into soccer, so I could run until I threw up on the track or train until I couldn't feel my legs anymore. But emotional pain was a lot harder. It was something I didn't quite understand, and I have had to work on for the last decade, where the best and easiest translation for me was to put it into a physical container, right? If I was hurting, if I was heartbroken, I would just go run. If I was sad or demoralized, I would lift. If I was feeling some sense of shame or guilt, then I might, go train or like go hike in the woods until I couldn't breathe anymore because I was so exhausted. I learned to translate pain from emotional to physical. And I think a lot of guys get kind of trapped in that where, there's not as much emotional education and emotional intelligence that's sort of helping navigate this. In your experience of losing a key sense, did you also have to change your way of navigating pain? Did you have to learn different skills to express the pain or to find a good outlet for it?
I'm not quite sure. That's a great answer. A great question. But that translating the emotional to physical, I'd love to use those examples, because you can also use just the opposite as a source of resilience and to help teach yourself. Because I became an endurance runner after going blind. And it was just one of those things that started off as being terrified of being trapped indoors. And I was stuck on the couch for the rest of my life, feeling sorry for myself. So I started running, and I started with marathons, and then I moved to ultras. And one of the things that I first thought of when you use that example was that hitting the wall. Right, there's your muscles and your brain both use the same kind of sugars for fuel. So when you do an endurance race, your sugar, I think glucose, or it gets depleted. And when your brain starts getting starved, it's the one that actually does the talking in your head, your brain, and it's saying, "Oh my God, you need to stop this. We're about to die." What happened? Something's wrong. I'm not getting the calories I need, and this is uncomfortable. You should stop. And all that negative talk starts happening. But if you just keep going, you'll push through the wall. the negative self-talk. And you know what you learn how to listen to what your body's actually trying to tell you, what your brain's actually telling you, is that maybe I need some more calories to keep going. But you don't just panic when, like, using the previous example, the alarms go off.
Right.
Right?
Right. Don't freak
So
out.
yeah. So
You know,
it's one of those things where I've learned how to push further and listen to the pain and what it's telling me. Is it just the alarm going off? Is it, am I hurting or am I injured? And knowing the difference between those, and that translates into the real world. Is this telling me something like I should change course, or is this just the discomfort of getting now stretching beyond my current abilities?
ooh, so I want to go here, and I'm glad you kind of tailed to that point. So I've ran a marathon in, shoot, I don't even know what year it was, but it was the Marine Corps marathon, not far from Walter Reed. And even though I don't know, 9 months or so that I trained up to that, there was a very interesting battle that I was going through. And most of that was the negative voice against the goal, right? I had this aspiration of running this race and completing a marathon. And my inner critic has and continues to be incredibly harsh. Like he's just the worst. He's the worst. And I think anytime you go to pursue something, now something like a marathon or an ultra has a very clear start and finish, right? You cross that line and you know that you've completed it. But something like building a business, something like creating a legacy or raising children is an ongoing pursuit. And I have found that that critical voice shows up most when the person I've been and the person I want to be are different. It's so loud, that voice. And it sounds like you've gotten really like a good handle on the difference between the voice of like a practical fear, right? That can help you make a really good choice, and just the critic that doesn't like anything and doesn't like change. How have you learned to discern the two? To listen to the alarm appropriately, but not to let that inner critic stop you. Because there are a lot of reasons that you could have stopped. A lot of reasons. I can name two of them, not being able to see or hear, but I'm sure there are more beyond that, because that marathon was overwhelming. It was like being in the stampede of Lion King that killed Mufasa. Like there was so much overload sensory. And that was just a marathon, but you're fighting this on a regular day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I love the Marine Corps Marathon. I'll be running it for the 6th time this year.
No way.
And it's a enormous. They put on a great race, and there it's it, it's a completely different experience than, say, my local Pensacola Marathon, where there's like 1,500 runners. And they both have their again, like the pros and cons, like the stampede, people elbowing you and tripping you, catching heels, and yeah, it's like a mosh pit on on
Totally.
wheels. But
Yep.
it's also a huge party, and so many around every turn there's people cheering you on and smiling and holding up those, from what I understand, holding up those poster boards, those signs. Like
Yep.
I remember my guide telling me there was a kid holding up a sign that said "Worst parade ever."
That's great.
Yeah, or what is it? A smile if you just farted and you can't
Nice.
help.
Nice.
But that just, it's one of the points, is that sometimes for me it was just mostly trial and error. But you got to keep a sense of humor about things. And so far, life hasn't killed me. So, so you just got to keep going. And even when the self-talk is getting you down, and maybe the pain is becoming a little bit more than you're used to, or almost as much as you possibly bear, yeah, that's when you gotta take a deep breath. Yeah, tell yourself that, yeah, you can do this. You've probably done harder things in the past, and uh, what is it like? Stuart Smiley, you're good enough, you're smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like you. Whatever that was, you got to do the counteractive positive affirmations. They really do work. And I was running 2023, middle of, or actually July 4th, 5th, and 6th. I was running Badwater 135, one of the hottest, toughest races on the planet. And I was going to be the first blind deaf person to complete that. And the whole time, it was hot, it was miserable, and it was really long. And there were plenty of times. It's like one of those races where you hit the wall like 20 times. So my guide, my buddy, an Army Ranger, would say, "How you doing?" And even if I wasn't, I was feeling completely the opposite. I was like, I'm the master of all time, space, and dimension. I wake up and piss excellence. And he goes, "Okay, so how are you really doing? I need to know if you need calories or water or something." I'm like, "Oh, okay." But I would just even if I didn't believe it for a second, I would still say it, because there's something that happens in our minds that those affirmations do help.
Mm. Ah, man. Yeah, overpowering the voice. Yeah, to what I hear too is that there's like a quantity. If your voice is loud, speak the affirmations more. I sort of interpret that from what you're sharing. I'd be curious to know this. I think what we live by, what we stand for in helping CEOs and leaders and influencers, and not like the weird influencers that sell jackets, but the individuals that create influence and change in others, is we help them to see a life, a business, an enterprise, a circle of people, a community that they may not be able to see today, right? That in imagining something that they may feel out of touch with, it changes the way they act and operate today. So we think of vision this way. Vision is this thing we cast in the future 3 years out, and it helps as a criteria define our choices. It yields new opportunities to make a new choice, because without that vision, we would have no way to discern what choice is a good choice or bad choice. If I say I want to be incredibly healthy in 3 years, then I have very specific choices to make today. And there's a visualization in that. Is it hard for you to visualize, or has it actually become easier to visualize, where you want to go with your life and how you want to impact people and how you want to provide service to the world?
I can visualize just as fine now as I did then. I mean, I still dream in full color, but one thing that I guess I've been cured of is screen time. So I can
Nice.
I can visualize just fine. I quit TV cold turkey, and it's given me less distraction. And I think that's one of our biggest problems, is that we can visualize all we want. Like, I want to be healthy and fit in 3 years. I want to have a 6-pack when in my 40s. And then you see a commercial for Domino's, and you're like, you know what? I would really love a pizza. And that does not that I don't still have those cravings, except I that happen when it comes to productivity, and it comes to consuming not just the food, but the entertainment, audiobooks, podcasts, all that kind of stuff. I'm not as visually distracted, which is a big one, from my internal vision. And I think that helps quite a bit.
Wow. Okay. Let's lean into this. Uh, I love the distinction between what you see and what you can be distracted by externally and your internal vision. And I definitely get the less distraction piece. What do you say to someone that can still see and needs to make dramatic change in their level of distraction?
What has to have dramatic intrinsic value as well. It's got to have something bigger than just the joy of seeing your own six pack, maybe for the first time since your teens or whatever. It's it's got to be because uh, if I live that healthy, I'm going to be able to see my three boys walk down the aisle with their brides. I'm going to be able to, uh, roughhouse with them well into my 60s, that kind of thing. I'm going to, I'm going to live long and I'm going to show them, what is life to live a vigorous life. And that's why I want to live healthy today.
Mm, man, that's the poster quote from today, that your internal vision has to have this immense internal and intrinsic value beyond just the thing. One of the challenges that we see is that when you start a business, you often get into business for the lifestyle. I actually think all of us get into business for a lifestyle, and over time, you start to recognize that a business can generate you what you want, whether that's a fancy car or a nice house, etc. And those things are often driven by ego, right?
Mhm.
I want these things for the satisfaction of them, and I got no qualms about it. I just know that if you want to chase something like a car, and you're using business and the labors of a team to get that, it may not have the kind of intrinsic, deeply rooted uh, fire in your belly kind of value that will allow you to go through the personal change to make it happen. And I just really love the way that you talk about the internal vision being so important. How do you, what would you say to someone that is afraid that them pursuing their vision and what they do find deeply intrinsically motivating and true to them would cost them their current life, what they have today? They want more, they want to chase it, and they believe in it, but they're afraid to let go of what they have today.
Well, they got, like I said, they got just like the being physically fit. It was, who was it? Simon Sinek, to start with why, right? You gotta make it big. So if you want to start a business and you want to leave the W-2, because you can live, of course, you can live a very fulfilling and a successful life with a W-2. But if you want to jump from that to becoming an entrepreneur, it's got to be, one of my friends said, it wasn't about the millions I made. It's how many people I can make a millionaire. And it was like, I want to build something that I can be proud of. I want to give my family options. And it's not about the money, because the money, that's like the abs, right? It's kind of a fleeting motivation in it, and in and of itself. Yes, I love making money. It- but it's about that freedom. It's about being able to decide whether or not I want to send my kids to a private school and let them go to public school, if I want to take them on vacations and let them learn in foreign cultures. And it's about how many people I can help become, how many people I can help create that kind of freedom for themselves. So it becomes bigger than just your own personal achievement.
Nice. Uh, I'm 100% aligned with that. You've you've gotten to speak on stage, you've gotten to share much of your journey and trials and tribulations. What's ahead for your future? What's a part of your vision today?
I say that I have such a limited input that I've got an overdeveloped output. Uh, I love telling the story. I have my own podcast. I love speaking on stage. And I think maybe that kind of blends with the character I've always had. I loved being the class clown. I loved being the life of the party. And now I've got this incredibly wild story. And I'm blessed to be able to have the freedom now to view my entrepreneurial ventures that I can go tell the story. And my biggest vision right now is for me to continue to live this adventure and be able to develop my story so that it can register with more people the best way possible so that they can also live their adventure.
Yes, please. I have one more question before we kind of taper. There are elements of my life that feel like they are way out of my control, and they're difficult. They're difficult to accept sometimes because I would like to change them. There are parts of my life and even through the work that I've been doing for many years in coaching CEOs and entrepreneurs, there are things that I would love to be able to change. And I want to be a steward for more people to be able to accept what is and then change what they can versus fight against what may not be changeable by them or may not be changeable directly by them. And that sequence of acceptance is something I have been maybe confused by or confounded by for a long time. I'm wondering if you have advice for me in this case, but anybody listening that is also struggling to accept, that something in their life happened, that things didn't go their way, that the business collapsed or a relationship fell apart, or, they suffered a traumatic injury that dramatically changes what they thought their future was. What have you learned from deep acceptance of your injuries?
One of the biggest things is learning about control, which you mentioned earlier, is that there are so many things that are within your control, and there are many things that are just outside that. And it's kind of like playing sports, baseball, lacrosse. When I was a kid, my son's a lacrosse player, and it's about like gripping that stick, right? If you try to gird down on that and strangle that stick, you're going to be stiff. You're not going to be able to play well. But you got to hold on to it, right? You got to be able to control it to an extent, but you can't choke it, right? So that's kind of like your life. Control what you can, but have enough grace to realize that you got to have kind of sometimes a loose grip, right? And be able to flow with the situations. Control your response to the situation rather than trying to control the situation entirely, because that's impossible.
How do you, because I'm a dad, how do you show up for your kids when you can't watch them play the same way you might have wanted to?
Well, I cook for them. I'm the primary chef in the house, and we have right now they're young enough that we have the tickle fights and all that. And then at mealtime, and of course, there's only one TV in the house, and I control I control when that goes on and off. And because I can't watch it, they're often disappointed. But I also, they're like dinner time, breakfast time, it's conversation time. I lived in Italy when I was in the Navy for 4 years, and I loved that dinner time. Meals were an event, and the food was an excuse to gather for the event. So you would sit down at a restaurant for dinner, and you owned that table all night long. And you would eat, and you would talk, and you would talk, and you would talk, and you would eat, and it would go on for hours. And I loved it. There was no rush. I'm trying to get my boys to slow down and just talk. And that's kind of how I show up for them, is that I talk to them.
There's some wisdom in that. Slowing down and talking. This is incredible. I personally gathered a lot from today's conversation, and I'm sure others will too, as you continue to share your story and share what you've been through. I would encourage anybody that is listening to check out some of Aaron's content on other platforms, because I wanted to focus more on your lessons in learning, not deliberately on the story, but I know you've gone into detail about it in other ways. Aaron, if people want to find you, if they want to learn more, where can they go?
Well, I'm on all the social platforms, Facebook, Instagram, X, LinkedIn. And of course, you can find me right now once a week on my own show, the Point of Impact podcast with Aaron Hale.
I highly recommend you check that out, The Point of Impact. You and I are both aligned on trying to make an impact and trying to make a dent. So I hope everyone listening to this starts paying attention to you. I think that would be a wise choice on their side. Let me fire one last question your way. What would you say to someone that, I want to connect vision here. If you got your sight back for a day, what would you most want to see?
Just my family's faces. I'd love to look in their eyes and see their smiles. I've never seen my boys. I saw one of the last pages in the photo album in my brain was my firstborn turned 1. And the whole family gathered around the Thanksgiving table. And then I went off to war and lost my eyesight. So it was a great last vision. But I would love to see my boys, love to see my parents, my brother and my sister, my wife. I'd love to look at them in the eye and just see them smile again.
It gets me choked up, man. I love seeing my boy. So I can very much appreciate that. Man, yeah, thank you. That was I don't know that it didn't expect that answer, but it just hit me in the middle of the chest. So that was awesome. I'm so grateful you were here. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your wisdom. And I hope that everyone that's listening gets to start to pay attention to you, because I think you got a lot more to offer the world. I'm so excited to follow along that journey, man.
Well, thanks for having me, Aaron. This was great.
All right, everyone. Give Aaron a follow. Check out his social platforms. Check out his podcast, The Point of Impact. And pay attention, because apparently he's running some epic races and doing things that most of us would be like, nah. It is incredible to hear his story. If you like what you hear here, take some time, leave us a review or share what you gleaned from this. I love getting messages and texts and DMs from people that take something away from our podcast. So if this is helpful and inspiring to you, please let me know. That's why we do it. And I hope you have a tremendous day. I hope you, wherever you are, wherever you're listening, I hope that this is a meaningful reason to be kind to yourself. That's one thing I took away, to have a lot of positive affirmations if you got a harsh inner critic like I do. Also to be really mindful of your internal vision and what feels intrinsically motivating for you, and not the interpretation of the world. So those things are things I'm walking away from. Aaron, you've been an awesome guest, man. Thank you again. I hope you have a great day.
Really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks a lot, Aaron.